Shut up, human. You are not supposed to be here. Exiled alien woman's desperate order. The ship was rated for glacial atmospheres, triple reinforced against electromagnetic surges. But as Kael Dren tumbled through the fractured hull of Aegis 3 teeth, chattering and blood-freezing mid-breath, he realized none of that mattered anymore. Arcana 7 wasn't just cold, it was malicious. Not in the way that a storm was dangerous, but in the way something ancient and unseen watches you with hungry patience. The sky had turned into a blur of white and violet static, swirling with electrical interference that danced across the jagged ridges of ice like the fingers of a dead god. He staggered through thigh-deep snow, cursing each step. His left leg dragged behind him the fracture in the femur, splintering with every crunch of ice beneath his boot. The emergency beacon was useless, swallowed by the storm's interference. His helmet's HUD flickered, then went dark, leaving only the rawness of reality frostbite gnawing at his fingertips, and something massive howling across the winds. Kael didn't scream. He couldn't. The air stole sound. Instead, he focused on the single pulse of warmth strapped around his neck, the necklace. A small obsidian pendant rounded like a tear, but etched with patterns that shimmered faintly blue. He'd found it on a derelict ruin during a prior dig, a souvenir from a species long gone. It had never done anything, until now. Now it was warm, vibrating lightly against his chest like a heartbeat that wasn't his. That pulse was the only thing guiding him. Then between wind-sliced ice pillars, he saw a structure half-buried, almost organic in shape, like a dome forged from woven light and frozen resin. At first he thought it was a hallucination. But as he staggered closer, his boots struck polished stone instead of ice. The dome shimmered. His proximity triggered something. An invisible ripple of energy swept outward from the walls, forcing the storm around it to bend snow, swirling into a vortex before settling. Kael slammed his body against the hexagonal door breath, hitching hand fumbling across the surface. It opened not mechanically, but like a biomembrane responding to desperation. The air inside hit him like fire-warm, pressurized, heavy with ozone. He collapsed. Then she stepped into view. A tall figure, armor of interlocking plates like layered crystal-bearing designs, so intricate they seemed to pulse with life. Her skin was a pale indigo hair, like woven silver cascading down her shoulders in thick cords. Eyes like mirrored steel, unblinking. The energy around her shimmered faintly, the room responding to her presence as though she were part of it. She didn't move to help him. Instead, she tilted her head and said in a voice flat but jagged, "You are not supposed to be here." Kael groaned. "Believe me, not my vacation plan." She didn't smile. In fact, the muscles in her jaw tightened, not in concern but disgust. "You wear the mark," she said, pointing at the pendant. He glanced down at it, still faintly glowing. "Yeah," he said, coughing. "Found it. Dig site near Pelion 6. It looked cool." She was already moving her stride, fast, deliberate. She knelt beside him, not to comfort him, but to inspect him, like a surgeon studying a virus. Her fingers reached out and hovered a breath away from the pendant. Then, as if stung, she retracted her hand. "It resonates," she whispered, and for the first time there was something else in her voice, not hate, not fear, recognition. She rose to her full height again. "Leave." Kael blinked through the haze. "Lady, I'm bleeding inside. I can't feel my toes, and there's a storm outside that wants to wear me like a scarf. If you kick me out, I'm dead. That is not my concern." She turned sharply, walking toward the back of the dome, where the walls curved into glowing alcoves of machinery, softly humming in languages older than Earth's oldest bones. The door behind Kael had already sealed shut. He was inside, but far from safe. Dragging himself upright with effort, he limped toward the closest flat surface and collapsed again. "Thanks for the hospitality," he muttered. She didn't answer. Time passed in a haze. Minutes, hours, he couldn't tell. He woke to find a flask of thick, warm liquid placed beside him. She wasn't in sight, but her presence lingered in the hum of the dome. He drank it greedily. Not food, not water, something else. It flooded him with energy, warmth, maybe even clarity. When she returned, she looked different. Not physically, but softer, as though her armor had loosened its grip. "I am Vaelira," she said simply. "Kael Dren," he replied. "Survey Corps. Formerly archaeologist. Now, increasingly frost-bitten idiot." She didn't laugh. She didn't smile. But her gaze flicked just briefly to the necklace again. That artifact is not yours, she said. I didn't steal it, Kael replied. I excavated it from a ruin. It didn't belong to anyone anymore. Her eyes narrowed. It belonged to Vaelira, she said. My people. Kael blinked. Then, that makes you exiled, she finished, turning away. This dome is all that remains of our northern sanctum. Hidden. Forgotten. Like me. She sat cross-legged on a raised dais light, pooling around her in soft tendrils. Kael hesitated, then asked, Why were you exiled? Her eyes glinted. Because I refused to become a weapon. The words hit him harder than he expected, not just for what they said, but for the way she said them, like someone who'd already died once. The next day the storm howled stronger. The dome flickered, once then held. Kael tried to repair his wrist transmitter, but the circuitry was fused solid. Even if I fix it, he admitted, no one's coming. My team's either dead or too far to reach. Vaelira sat across from him, watching, silent. You hate humans, he asked bluntly. No, she said. I hate you, Fair Kael said, but if I may suggest, hating me takes energy, and right now we might need all of it just to not die. She didn't respond, but she didn't walk away either. Instead, her gaze flicked again to the pendant, and Kael, half out of curiosity, half to piss her off, reached up and held it out toward her. You want it back? He asked. She reached forward. Her fingers brushed the obsidian surface, and the room shuddered. A low hum rose from the dome's core. Lights flickered. Patterns swirled across the pendant and pulsed outward, connecting to panels embedded in the walls. And in that instant, Kael saw her freeze. Her eyes wide, her breath caught, and a single tear slid down her cheek. You, she whispered, voice cracking. You shouldn't exist. Then she stumbled back. Kael just sat there, necklace glowing in his palm, and said the only thing that made sense. Well, that's new. Kael didn't sleep that night, not really. Not with the walls of the dome still humming like a memory trying to wake up, and not with Vaelira sitting across from him, barely breathing, barely moving, eyes locked on the pendant, like it might bite her again. She hadn't spoken another word since the resonance. She'd retreated to the far alcove where strange glyphs pulsed faintly across the surface, like neural signal symbols Kael didn't recognize. But his gut told him they weren't just decorative. They were alive. The silence between them had weight. Not the kind that asked to be broken, but the kind that warned not to. Kael cleared his throat anyway. So just to be sure we're not in some kind of ancient marriage ritual, or we no answer. He looked down at the pendant. It had gone dark again, just a dull piece of alien tech hanging from a cracked leather cord. Whatever it did, it had pulled something out of her. And him. You said I shouldn't exist, he murmured. Care to unpack that, still silent. But her body shifted subtly like a predator, deciding whether to strike or flee. He tried again. You saw something, through the necklace. A memory. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than before. Sharper too, not a memory. A resonance echo. It only activates with blood ties. Kael blinked. You're saying I'm related to someone in your past? Vaelira stood then, slow and deliberate, walking toward the central interface in the dome. Her fingers hovered over it, hesitant. Not just someone, she said. A warrior. One of our best. He wore that pendant. But he betrayed us. Kael stiffened. Well, that's awkward. He died, she added. Kael paused. Okay, slightly less awkward, but still pretty bad. She turned to him, expression unreadable. His name was Syrian. She stopped. Kael caught the flicker in her voice, the hesitation. You're what? She looked away. That no longer matters. Kael didn't push. But the name rang through him like an echo through ice. Syrian. Somehow it felt familiar. Not as a sound, but as an instinct. A reflex buried beneath layers of time. He exhaled slowly. All right. I'm not him. I don't remember being him. And if I am some kind of clone or reincarnation, I'm really bad at it. Vaelira's gaze stayed fixed on the wall. The dome wouldn't respond to you otherwise. Yeah, well, Kael muttered, rubbing his temple. Technology's always had a thing for me. I once opened a Krovan vault by sneezing on it. Her lips twitched, barely, a fraction of a smile that never fully formed. Kael caught it. Did you just almost laugh? No, you did. That was a lip flint. You lip flinched. Vaelira shook her head and walked away, but something in the tension between them loosened, just slightly. Later that day, the storm began to shift. Kael noticed it in the way the wind didn't scream quite as loud, the way the dome's temperature stabilized without compensating as aggressively. He sat beside the entrance checking his supplies, what little remained, and recalibrating the scanner on his left gauntlet. Power 15%, enough for 2 signal bursts, maybe 3, if he didn't breathe too hard. Vaelira returned from her patrol around the dome's inner systems. We're running out of time, she said. The storm is changing. That's good, right? Kael asked. No, it means the Thanok are migrating. Kael frowned. What now? She walked past him, tapping a glyph that projected a faint topographical display in the air. A map of the surrounding glacier fields. Thanok, she repeated. Predators that follow thermal flux. When the storm breaks, they hunt the surface. Kael grimaced. Right. Electric ice monsters. My favorite. They can detect residual body heat through 2 meters of ice. The dome's shield has begun to fray. Within a day, they'll locate us. Kael stood slowly. Then we need a plan. She turned toward him, arms crossed. There is no plan. I was content to remain here until the dome failed. Now you've awoken a signal beacon, reactivated resonance fields, and drawn Thanok like blood in the water. Kael held up a hand. Hold on. I didn't mean to do any of that. I just didn't want to freeze to death, and your welcome mat was the only one glowing. Vaelira's eyes narrowed. You shouldn't have survived the crash. Kael opened his mouth to respond, and then froze, because she hadn't said it like an observation. She'd said it like a warning. You think someone meant for me to die, he asked. Or meant for you to find me? She replied, voice colder than the wind outside. Silence fell again, but this time it was heavier. They ate in silence nutrient bars Kael had salvaged, and a thick broth Vaelira had synthesized from something she called carrot root. It tasted like spiced rust, but Kael didn't complain. Night came, or what passed for night on Arcanus 7, a dimming of the violet skies into something closer to charcoal, with the stars struggling through the storm veil. Kael sat near the central core, watching the resonance pulses. They reacted to him, now glimmering, whenever he neared. It was like the dome remembered someone else and was trying to decide if he was the same. He glanced back at Vaelira. She was sitting with her eyes closed, breath-steady hands resting over her knees. Meditation, maybe, or dreaming of a time when her world hadn't collapsed. He spoke softly. You said you refused to become a weapon. Her eyes opened, slowly. Yes. What did they want you to do? Vaelira didn't answer immediately. Then they fused us with bioregulators, tools to survive any world. Heat, cold, radiation. We could adapt, regenerate, and resist chemical warfare. They made us perfect. And then they ordered us to kill entire colonies, civilians, to ensure the survival of the Varel elite. Kael stared. And you refused. I killed the commanding general who gave the order, she said, voice even. Then I fled here. I've been alone for 72 cycles. Kael swallowed hard. And now I've dragged all of that back up. She didn't nod, but she didn't deny it either. That night, Kael woke to a sound. Not loud, not sharp, but primal, a scraping. He rose quickly, glancing toward the wall where faint cracks had begun to form in the outermost membrane. He checked the readings. Static interference. Pressure fluctuation. Then he saw it. A shape. Moving just beyond the translucent surface. Massive. Spiked. And glowing blue through the ice. Kael's blood froze faster than the blizzard. He turned to yell for Vaelira, but she was already there. Blade drawn, face expressionless. The Thanok, she said quietly. They found us. The dome groaned under the pressure, low resonant, like the deep sigh of something ancient and tired. A hairline fracture zigzagged across the outer wall, crystalline shards flaking off with every breath of wind that slipped through. The Thanok outside circled like wolves sensing a wound. Kael didn't know much about these creatures, only what Vaelira had muttered and what his instincts screamed at him now. tall, quadruped, semi-sentient, fed on thermal signatures and hunted in coordinated packs, like sharks with ice for skin and lightning for nerves. How many, Kael asked, backing away from the wall. 3, maybe 4. Vaelira was already strapping on her battle harness, thin metallic strands, interwoven with crystal nodes that shimmered when they touched her skin. Her blade dormant until now pulsed with faint energy. Kael looked at his own gear, just a standard-issue thermal jacket and a flare gun with 1 round left. Not exactly heroic. He forced a smirk. So, what's the plan? Die impressively, Vaelira didn't answer. Instead, she strode to the central core and tapped a sequence of glyphs. A section of the dome's interior wall peeled away to reveal a weapons rack, ancient, elegant, and nothing like the utilitarian gear Kael was used to. She tossed him something. It looked like a glove until it latched onto his wrist and expanded into a curved forearm brace, humming softly. It's a heat diffuser, she said. It'll mask your temperature signature for a short time. If you stay quiet and low, they may not see you. Kael blinked, and Vaelira turned eyes sharp. I'm not hiding. The scraping stopped. Then crack. A burst of ice exploded inward as one of the Thanok slammed its bulk against the weakened wall. A flickering field held it back barely. Through the breach, Kael saw a nightmare, 4-legged, plated in jagged crystal, with tendrils of bioluminescent energy running down its spine. Its face had no eyes, just a triangular maw that hissed steam. Lovely, Kael whispered. You didn't mention they drool lightning. Vaelira stepped forward. They're here for you, he stared at her. For me, while you woke the resonance. The dome's signal. They hunt power, not meat. Before Kael could respond, the wall collapsed. Everything moved in a blur. Vaelira charged forward, blade igniting into a silver arc. She moved like a ghost wrapped in lightning, sliding beneath the first Thanok's strike and slicing through its leg with a clean, surgical slash. The creature shrieked, not from pain, Kael realized, but from confusion. It wasn't expecting resistance. The second Thanok crashed through the breach, mouth glowing. It released a blast of superheated vapor that melted a section of the floor steam, billowing outward. Kael dove aside, rolling behind, a support column pulse screaming in his ears. Vaelira leapt off a broken console, twisting midair. Her foot connected with the beast's spine, flipping her over it in a fluid motion. Her blade struck again, this time cleaving into the creature's neck. Sparks and ice exploded. Kael stared. This wasn't just survival, it was art. Then the third one came. He didn't see it, just felt the tremor. The dome's side split open and something huge slammed through, grabbing Vaelira mid-swing and hurling her across the room. She smashed into the far wall armor, cracking body limp for a terrifying second. Vaelira, Kael screamed, then turned and met the creature's gaze. No, not gaze. Focus. It moved toward him, slow, deliberate, as though curious. The pendant around his neck glowed faintly again. That's what it was after. Him. It wasn't a predator in the traditional sense, it was a seeker. A bloodhound drawn not to scent but memory. Energy. Kael backed away, heart hammering. Not today, he muttered, reaching for the flare gun. He raised it. The creature hissed, and then something snapped. Vaelira launched herself from the side blade, piercing through the creature's skull from below. It convulsed, shrieked, then collapsed in a heap of crystal and black ichor. Kael stared. She stood over the corpse, panting, blood on her lip armor fractured, but still standing. He exhaled. Remind me never to piss you off? The battle was over. 3 corpses steamed in the dim heat of the broken dome. The 4th Thanok had fled, either sensing the tide turning or unwilling to test fate again. The structure itself was damaged, walls, cracked power, fading, the resonance core sputtering. Kael stood beside Vaelira, who was pressing a hand to her ribs. You okay? I've survived worse, she said, but her voice was strained. Kael reached into a side pouch and handed her a compression band. She hesitated, then accepted it silently. As she patched herself, Kael surveyed the wreckage. This place isn't going to last another night. I know, he turned to her. Then we need to move. Vaelira didn't respond immediately. Then there is one place, south of here. A buried chamber beneath the ice. It predates even this sanctum. Kael raised an eyebrow. Another dome. She shook her head. Not a shelter, a vault, where the first memory cores were made. If we reach it, we might learn who you really are. Why did the pendant respond to you? He hesitated. And if we find out I am him, then I'll decide whether to kill you, she said flatly. Kael paused, then grinned. Fair enough. As they packed supplies from the ruined dome, what little remained, Kael caught himself watching her. Not just her movements, but her silence, her stillness. He didn't trust her, not fully, but he was beginning to understand her. She didn't hate him, not really. She hated what he represented. An echo, a ghost, a reminder of something she'd buried long ago. And now beneath the ice it was waking. The storm came down in jagged veils of ice and fury, a white scream swallowing the horizon. Kael Dren had faced sub-zero blizzards before on Europa, on the polar ranges of Titan, but Arcana 7 wasn't a storm. It was a test. Inside the dome, the temperature dropped a full 5 degrees in under a minute. The insulation grid flickered, then steadied. But the system was old. Like everything else here, it felt borrowed, barely tolerated by time. Vaelira moved like a shadow across the chamber, silent but fast. She pressed her palm to one of the glowing pylons embedded in the wall. Her brow furrowed. Kael leaned against a nearby panel, arms crossed, his breath fogging in the dim light. So, storm shelter. Not storm-proof, Vaelira didn't answer. That's fine, Kael muttered. I love living in constant mortal peril. Builds character. Finally she turned. It's the knock. The dome's energy signature draws them during solar inversions. They sense the thermal fluctuations. Kael blinked. You mean we're basically ringing the dinner bell? Yes. Awesome. The first sound came like a whisper. Not loud, not sharp. A scraping. Kael stiffened. Please tell me that's the wind. Vaelira didn't reply. Instead, she was already moving armor. Locked blade pulled from its resting rack. It hummed softly with activation. Biothermal steel, Kael guessed. Ancient. Lethal. The second sound was louder. A crack. Then a low thrum that resonated in Kael's sternum, like someone plucking the cords of his ribcage. He turned slowly toward the wall. Behind the outer membrane, a shape moved. No eyes, no clear body. Just something big and wrong, pressing against the barrier with the curiosity of a beast and the precision of a predator. Kael took a step back. Do they break in? If they're hungry enough, Vaelira said, crouched low. Great. Hungry murder beasts. Just what I needed to spice up my exile. She glanced at him. You're not funny. I'm not trying to be. I'm compensating. The wall flexed inward and then shattered. The creature burst through in a hail of crystal shards and burning air. The Thanok was massive, six-limbed, spined along its back, its entire body gleaming like obsidian wrapped in lightning veins. It skittered low to the ground, then rose to full-height, mouth splitting open in a hiss Kael felt more than heard. Vaelira moved, not like a soldier, like a memory of a weapon, graceful, silent, lethal. Her blade caught Thanok's first lunge, slicing one of its legs clean through. The beast shrieked, flailing its bioluminescence, pulsing out of rhythm. Kael ducked behind a console. He had no weapon, no armor, just a flare gun with a cracked trigger and a heart slamming against his ribs like it wanted to quit. Another screech. He looked up, Vaelira was pinned. The second Thanok had breached the opposite wall, barreling her against the dome's interior claws, raking across her armored forearm. Kael didn't think. He ran, grabbed a shattered pipe from the floor, and swung. It was a stupid move. He struck the beast's side, barely a dent, but it turned just enough for Vaelira to break free and drive her blade upward into its throat. It collapsed, twitching light dying from its body. Kael stood frozen. She looked at him. You're a terrible fighter, she said. He grinned, breathless. But I make a great distraction. When the final Thanok dragged itself back through the breach and fled into the storm, the dome lay in ruins. Two walls fractured, one energy pylon offline. The power core pulsed in a sickly rhythm. Kael sat on the floor, cradling his arm. Bruised, maybe broken. Vaelira paced the perimeter, eyes sharp. He watched her for a moment before speaking. You could have left me. During the fight. She stopped. You didn't. She met his gaze. Her voice came quieter than before. You didn't leave me either. Kael laughed softly. I guess that makes us even. No, she said, stepping closer. It makes us something else. She looked down at the pendant again. Its glow had returned, brighter, and when she reached out to it, it didn't pulse. It sang. A wave of warmth hit the room. Not heat, memory. Kael staggered back as images surged behind his eyes, flashes of a warrior kneeling, offering the same pendant to a younger Vaelira beneath a shattered sky. A promise made, a betrayal carried. Vaelira's face went pale. That's not just a necklace, she whispered. That's a recorder, a core fragment. Kael swallowed. You mean it holds someone's life? She looked up. Her eyes searched his face, and for a breathless second, Kael saw her uncertainty collapse into something raw. Recognition, not of who he was, but of who he might be. And neither of them knew if that was a salvation or another war waiting beneath the ice. They had walked in silence for hours that felt like days across the dead white expanse of Arcana 7. The storm had lessened, but never truly left trailing behind them, like a predator waiting for their steps to falter. Their destination lay buried beneath miles of ice, somewhere south, somewhere ancient. Kael didn't know what he expected to find there. Answers maybe, or worse, truth. He glanced sideways at Vaelira. Her stride never faltered, but there was tension behind every step. Not from pain, from memory. The pendant swung gently around his neck. Its glow had faded again, but sometimes, especially when he got too close to her, it pulsed once like a heartbeat, remembering an old rhythm. They didn't talk much, but they listened to the snow, to the silence, to each other's breath. In the quiet between wind and footfall, something unspoken hung between them. A weight, a question, and then it happened. They'd stopped briefly near a rise of black stone exposed by the storm. Kael knelt to check his signal gear. He looked up. Vaelira was staring at him. Not looking, staring. Her eyes weren't seeing him. They were seeing through him. I saw your face in the memory, she said suddenly. Kael blinked. Just a coincidence. Genetics, maybe. The galaxy's full of resemblances. No. Her voice was sharper than the wind. Not resemblance. Identity. Kael stood slowly. You think I am him, I don't know. But the pendant doesn't resonate with lies. She stepped closer. When I touched it for the first time, I saw us, standing beneath the temple of Vaelira in the moment before it all ended. You said something to me, he swallowed. What she hesitated. You said, when the storm takes me, remember I chose you over glory. Kael felt the wind cut straight through his skin. That's poetic, he said, attempting levity. Sounds like something I'd say. She didn't smile. Instead, she reached forward and touched the pendant again. It pulsed, once, twice, and then the world around them changed. The ice beneath their feet glowed, not from the sun, which didn't exist here, but from within, like something ancient waking from sleep. Glyphs shimmered in the snow, expanding in fractal patterns beneath them. The sky darkened, or maybe their eyes simply closed to the world they knew. Because they were no longer standing on Arcanis. They were somewhere else. Someone else. Kael gasped. He stood in the center of a massive stone chamber, carved into a mountain of obsidian. Fires burned in suspended basins, casting molten shadows on the walls. Warriors knelt in circles around a central dais where she stood. Vaelira, but younger, stronger, unbroken. She held a spear aloft, and the crowd chanted in a language Kael didn't understand, but felt each word crashing like a war drum in his chest. Then he entered. Kael, or the man who wore his face, Syrian, clad in black armor edged with silver runes. His stride was proud but heavy, as if already grieving. He approached Vaelira and offered her the pendant. The same pendant. The moment stretched, and then shattered. Kael stumbled, falling backward into the snow. He gasped for air, chest burning. Vaelira stood rigid, breath caught in her throat. That was the initiation ceremony, she said softly. When Syrian gave me the mark of memory. It bound us. Kael sat up. So it's some kind of bond device, more she whispered. It stored everything we were. Our choices, our loyalties, our love. She didn't look at him as she said it, but the word hung. Kael said nothing. What could he say? He barely remembered last week, and here she was staring at him like he held the key to a lifetime she'd buried in ice. So he said at last, trying to break the tension, "How long were you two?" You know, her eyes narrowed. Human mating humor. I mean, if I'm going to be blamed for his bad breakup, I should at least know how bad it was. She actually snorted. The sound startled both of them, and for a brief moment the ice between them cracked, not from pressure, but from something warmer. They found shelter that night in a hollow beneath a glacier wall carved by wind, half collapsed but shielded. Cal set up a low heat field while Vaelira checked her wounds beneath her armor. Cal tried not to watch. Failed. Her back was marked by scars, not just physical, but burned in. Some from blades, others from surgical grafts. Symbols had been etched into her skin and then burned away. She caught him staring. "They made us into weapons," she said, "then broke us when we refused." Kyle swallowed. "In Syrian, he chose the council over me." Kyle lowered his gaze. And then he said something he didn't expect to say. "I don't think I would have." Vaelira looked at him, long and slow. "Don't say that," she said. "You don't know what it cost him, but I know what it cost you." Silence. And then she shifted slightly closer to the fire. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to share the warmth. They didn't speak again that night, but for the first time they slept in the same shelter. No walls between them, only history, and the quiet hum of a memory still deciding whether to return. Morning, if such a thing existed on Arcanus 7, came without light. Just a fading of the storm's voice and a hush that stretched too long to be natural. Kel woke first joints, aching breath, misting into the frozen air. He shifted slightly aware of how close Vaelira lay. She hadn't moved far in the night. Her posture was still alert, back to the wall arm draped protectively over the hilt of her blade. Even in sleep, she radiated tension. Kyle didn't blame her. He'd be tense too if the person next to him looked exactly like the man who shattered her world. He turned away quietly, rummaging through the last of their rations. Compressed nutrient gel. Tasted like warmed plastic, but it kept the frostbite at bay. He left one beside her without a word. "You still breathe too loud," she murmured, eyes opening. Cal smirked. "That's how you know I'm not him. Syrian probably breathed like a war hymn." She sat up slowly, rubbing her shoulder. He was quiet, but not silent. He always left room for questions. Kael paused. "That actually sounds like me." Vaelira didn't answer, but the silence this time wasn't rejection. It was a thought. The journey resumed by midday. The coordinates she remembered were etched into the resonance matrix, the necklace serving now as a living map. Cal carried it around his neck like a reluctant relic, pulsing faintly whenever they veered off course. It wasn't pointing them toward a location. It was pointing toward a decision. The wind picked up again as they crossed into the lower ridges. Here the ice was thinner, translucent in parts, revealing the shadows of strange roots beneath the surface. Not organic, not artificial. Something between. Like the planet had once been alive, and parts of it still dreamed. "Ever think about what's waiting for us down there?" Kael asked. Vaelira walked ahead, gaze fixed on the horizon. "No." "Why not?" "Because wondering doesn't help when death is the only guarantee." Cal rolled his eyes. "You're a blast at parties. I haven't been to a gathering in 72 years. He blinked. "You're kidding." She didn't respond. He stared. "Wait, are you?" "I stopped aging the moment I bonded to the dome." Cal tripped slightly. "You're biologically paused. My body is. My mind is not." He considered this. "So I've been traveling with a battle-hardened immortal memory tank for 5 days and I didn't even know it." "Yes." "Hot." She stopped in her tracks, turned, raised an eyebrow. Kael grinned sheepishly. That was probably inappropriate. Her gaze didn't change, but the corner of her mouth twitched, barely, a maybe smile. He called it a win. The glacier split suddenly, not from an earthquake, from memory. The pendant pulsed once, then shot a beam of light straight into the ice below them. A seam cracked open, forming a staircase of ancient stone, spiraling downward into what looked like a buried cathedral. No power field, no door. It had been waiting. They descended slowly. The walls were covered in bioluminescent patterns, coiling scripts and shapes that shimmered with their passing, reacting to skin and breath, and thoughts not yet formed. Kael reached out once and felt a jolt of warmth run up his arm. Don't touch too long, Vaelira warned. They remember intent, the walls, the entire place. Kael stepped back quickly. Have you ever gotten used to being the weirdest person in the room, he asked. I never enter rooms, she replied. Another win. They reached the central chamber. At first glance, it looked like a simple altar, raised dais circular platform, ringed with dormant pylons. But as Kael approached the pendant, began to glow again. Stronger, hotter. Not like before, not a pulse, a pull. And in the center of the altar, hovering without wires or support, was a sphere, glass-like, hollow. Within it, suspended in fluid, was a crystalline shard etched with markings Kael didn't recognize. Vaelira stepped forward. Her breath hitched. That's a memory spindle. Kael tilted his head. Looks like a space snow globe. She didn't respond. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. But before she touched it, she turned. Take off the pendant. Kael hesitated. What if this is going to show us the truth? It needs a clean connection. It needs your skin, your blood. He swallowed, then removed it from his neck and placed it in her hand. The moment it touched the spindle, the room came alive. Light surged through the floor. The pylons activated, projecting images not as holograms, but as memories made real. Kael stood frozen, watching himself. No Syrian. Walking through a Vaelira stronghold. It was under siege. Flames burst from the walls. Screams echoed. And Syrian, his face grim, placed the pendant into Vaelira's hands. You must go, he said. She shook her head. Not without you. I've already betrayed them, he whispered. But I will not betray you. The memory warped. Shouted orders. Blood on the stone. Syrian raised a hand not in farewell, but in protection as the building collapsed around him. Vaelira gasped. The vision ended. Silence. Only their breathing. Kael turned. Her eyes were wet, but not broken. She looked at him not like someone searching for answers, but like someone remembering. It wasn't betrayal, she said softly. He gave me the chance to live. Kael stepped forward. And now you've remembered. She nodded. But then, her expression shifted. No, she whispered, because behind the spindle, the wall began to move. Symbols rearranged themselves, and a second figure emerged from the shadows, just a projection, but one that made Kael's heart stop. Another Syrian, but older, scarred, and smiling. The voice echoed. If this is being viewed, the clone has survived, and the resonance is complete. Kael stepped back. What the hell, Vaelira frozen? The message continued. You were never meant to be me. You were meant to become what I could not. The words echoed through the chamber like ripples through glass. You were never meant to be me. You were meant to become what I could not. Kael stood motionless. The older Syrian, this flickering specter of the past, looked straight ahead, as if he could see Kael across time, as if he knew this moment would come. Wait, Kael whispered. Clone. The projection nodded slowly. If you are hearing this, it means the failsafe survived. My DNA encoded in the pendant's lattice would have found the nearest genetic match, or vessel. Vaelira moved closer, her gaze sharp, unreadable. Kael's breath caught. I'm not just wearing his necklace. You are carrying his second chance, Vaelira said quietly. The projection continued. We were wrong to make gods out of warriors. I became a symbol of war when I should have been something else. So I made a choice to encode not just my memories, but the chance to rewrite my purpose. If the resonance is completed, it means you are him and not him. Kael backed away, a slow dread coiling in his stomach. I didn't sign up for this, he muttered. Vaelira stepped in front of him. Kael, breathe. I'm someone else's backup plan. No, she said. You're more than that. He gave you his starting point. What you build beyond that is your own. Kael stared at her. You're really calm for someone whose ex just announced I'm his living USB stick. Vaelira blinked. USB, never mind. The chamber dimmed. The projection faded. But the resonance hadn't stopped. Around them, the walls pulsed, shifting, as if the architecture itself responded to the emotional weight in the air. The spindle cracked, and from its center, a soft hum emerged. The shard inside began to spin slowly, glowing. From it, two energy tendrils stretched out, one toward Kael, one toward Vaelira. She moved first. Without hesitation, she pressed her palm against it. The energy merged into her skin like liquid flame. Her eyes glowed momentarily. Her breath hitched, then steadied. Kael hesitated. "This isn't going to fry me, is it?" "No more than you already are," she said. He rolled his eyes and reached out. The connection hit him like a thunderclap. Not pain, just weight. Thousands of impressions slammed into his mind, images, words, memories that weren't his, but now lived behind his eyes. He saw battles Syrian had fought, saw Vaelira's face laughing, then crying, then gone. He saw betrayal, but not the kind she thought. Syrian had turned on the council to save civilians from extermination. His execution had been faked, and his memories, stored, waiting. When the connection ended, Kael dropped to one knee, chest heaving. Vaelira crouched beside him, one hand on his back. "Are you all right? He exhaled. "I'm not sure who I am anymore." "You're Kael," she said. "You've always been Kael." He looked up at her. "Do you believe that?" She didn't answer, but her hand didn't move. They emerged from the vault into bitter wind and endless white. The storm had returned, distant but closing. The snow curled through the sky in long predatory tendrils. They had less than an hour before the next front buried everything again. As they climbed the ridge, Kael kept glancing at her. "You knew I'd activate it, I suspected. And you didn't tell me it wouldn't have helped." He sighed. "I miss normal days, when the worst thing I had to deal with was interspecies diplomacy and dietary misunderstandings." Vaelira gave him a look. "I once mediated a trade dispute between a sentient mushroom and a colony of blind lizards," he added. "That explains a lot." "Hey, I was good at it." At the top of the ridge, they paused. Below, nestled in a shallow valley of black stone and swirling snow, stood the echo beacon. Kael hadn't seen it before. Neither had she. It wasn't a structure, not exactly. More like the skeleton of a signal tower fused into a crystalline growth, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat through the snow. Vaelira's voice was hushed. That was Syrian's last gift, a directional transmitter. He hid it so the council wouldn't track the memory core. Kael nodded slowly. "So if we activate it," she nodded, "it will broadcast the truth. His memories. Your memories." Kael looked at the beacon again. "What if the galaxy doesn't want to hear it? Then we give them no choice." The final descent was quiet. They moved like shadows, aware that every step drew them closer to revelation or danger. The beacon was unguarded, as if forgotten, or as if no one had dared come back. At the base, Kael found the input port. The pendant pulsed against his chest. "Once I slot this in," he said, "there's no taking it back." Vaelira stood beside him. "That's true of every choice worth making." He smiled faintly. "You've gotten really poetic lately. I've had 72 years of silence." Kael hesitated, then slid the pendant into the slot. The beacon came alive. Light shot skyward, piercing the clouds. Somewhere above, satellites blinked awake. Somewhere far beyond, a signal re-entered galactic range, and far, far away. Someone answered. A deep rumble echoed through the valley. Kael turned. A massive silhouette moved through the snowstorm's edge. Another Thanok, but larger, older, covered in deep scars. It didn't roar. It watched, then slowly approached. Kael raised his arm. We've got company." Vaelira drew her blade. "That's not just any Thanok." The creature stopped 20 meters away, then dropped something from its mouth. A charred drone husk. Galactic surveillance tech. Kael stepped forward, cautious. The creature watched. Then, it turned and left. Snow swallowed its shape. Kael stared stunned. Vaelira sheathed her blade. "They heard the signal," she said. "And they know it changes everything." Kael exhaled. "I think we just started a war." Vaelira looked at him, expression unreadable. "No," she said. "We just ended one." They didn't speak for a long time after Thanok vanished into the snow. There was no need to. Some moments carry a weight so absolute that even words, especially words, feel like intrusions. The beacon continued its quiet pulse behind them, sending light and memory into a sky that no longer felt empty. Somewhere up there, satellites stirred. Somewhere farther, eyes opened. Kael leaned against the jagged stone of the beacon's base, staring into the distance. So, what now? Vaelira didn't answer immediately. She knelt beside the discarded drone husk left by Thanak. Her fingers brushed over the carbon scoring tracing the symbol etched into its surface. Galactic Dominion Mark 9. Surveillance. Covert Ops. Elite grade. She stood. Now they know we're alive. Correction, Kael said. Now they know I'm alive. And you've remembered everything. Vaelira looked at him, eyes narrowed. You think they'll come for you? I think I just activated a beacon that carries the personal memoir of a genetically resurrected war criminal/hero. Yeah, I think someone out there's going to have a few questions. She didn't argue, because it was true. They set up a temporary outpost inside the beacon's base, a hollowed chamber laced with dormant tech. Cal managed to reactivate some of the systems using residual heat from the pendant. The chamber thrummed softly with power, not quite warmth, but something adjacent. A womb of old purpose reborn. While he worked, Vaelira stood guard near the entrance. Her silhouette framed against the cold light, motionless except for the slow rise and fall of her breath. Kyle watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. The woman who had once nearly gutted him on sight now stood between him and the world like a living shield. Funny, he thought. The galaxy could break you in so many ways, but sometimes the cracks let something new in. He cleared his throat. You okay? She turned slowly. No. Cal raised an eyebrow. I remember everything now, she said. Every order I refused. Every friend I lost. Every time I wondered if Syrian had left me or died protecting me. Cal didn't speak. She stepped closer. I remember loving him. That quiet hung between them, brittle and sharp. Kyle nodded. You're not sure what to do with me, are you? I don't know if you're him or just someone who looks like the shadow I couldn't let go of. Kyle chuckled. Well, you're in luck. I'm very good at being the wrong person in the right place. She studied him, really looked at him. Then you've always been too warm, physically or emotionally? Yes. Later that night, or what passed for night, Kel stood outside the chamber gazing up at the stars. The storm had pulled back for now, revealing a sky like shattered glass. Constellations he didn't recognize stared back. He felt the weight of Syrian's legacy in his chest. It wasn't just the memories, it was the expectation, the chance to rewrite a story that had ended in fire. Vaelira stepped beside him. Do you regret it, she asked. Activating the beacon? No more coming here, accepting what you are. He took a breath. No, but I'm scared. Her voice softened. Of what he hesitated, that I'll become him, or worse, that I won't. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was careful. Light, but steady. You are not Syrian, she said. He made his choice. You make yours. He looked at her. Even if mine hurts you, she didn't blink, especially then. They stood like that for a while, silent, close, but not touching, breathing, in a moment they both knew couldn't last. When they returned to the chamber, Kyle opened one of the memory panels on the wall. It responded to his biometrics, now opening like a flower, inside a cracked holoframe. He wiped away the dust. It showed a moment frozen in time, Syrian and Vaelira, side by side, standing in front of the Temple of Varel. Young, fierce, smiling. She saw it. Her breath caught. Kyle glanced at her. Do you want me to put it away? No, she said quietly. I want to remember both. He nodded, and carefully he placed it on the ledge beside the power conduit. It would stay there, glowing faintly with the pulse of old love and new beginnings. Later, in the dim hum of the chamber, as the beacon pulsed into space and the planet seemed to sleep, Kael stirred. He didn't know why. He turned, some instinct, some reflex. Vaelira sat across from him, her knees drawn close, her armor removed, save for the thermal layer beneath. Can't sleep, he asked. No. Same. She hesitated, then said without looking at him, Do you believe in fate? Kael exhaled. I used to, before Arcanus, and now I believe in choices. She nodded slowly. Then would you have chosen me? If none of this happened, Kael paused. His voice when it came was quiet. Honest. I think I already did. Vaelira turned her head. Their eyes met, and for the first time she smiled. Not a twitch, not a maybe, a real smile. And Kael, with all the storms behind him and all the uncertainty ahead, smiled back. Whatever they were. They were no longer alone beneath the ice. The echo pulse of the beacon never stopped. It beat like a second heart, low, steady, and infinite. Somewhere light years away, satellites were already relaying the signal. Data packets of memory and confession streaked through hyperspace toward political halls and military archives that had long buried the viral name in silence. And in the dim chamber beneath the ice, Kael Dren sat beside Vaelira, watching that signal stretch across the stars like a thread tying them to something far bigger than either had expected. I keep wondering, he murmured, what they'll do with the truth. Vaelira didn't look away from the console. That depends. On what? Whether the galaxy remembers how to listen. Kael chuckled, soft, not mocking. You always speak like you're reciting prophecies. She glanced at him, then back at the screen. That's because I used to believe in them. He leaned back. And now I believe in you. He froze, not at her words, but at how quietly she said them, like it wasn't a declaration, like it was simply the truth. The next day something changed. Kael noticed it first when the atmospheric pressure outside the beacon began to drop. The storm hadn't returned, but something deeper had shifted. The ice hummed beneath their feet, low and irregular, as if the planet itself was exhaling after holding its breath for centuries. Seismic activity, Kael asked, checking the old dome's interface. Vaelira stood still, one hand on the wall. No, she whispered. Something is awakening. And she was right. Moments later, the beacon's signal warped, just slightly, but enough to trigger a cascade of old protocols across the chamber. From beneath the floor, a ring of hidden nodes rose, glowing red and gold. Vaelira's eyes widened. This wasn't part of Syrian's design. The pendant on Kael's chest pulsed again, but this time with heat. That's new. Before either of them could react, a column of energy erupted from the platform in the center of the room, rising toward the ceiling, and then splitting into holographic fragments. And there, projected between them, stood another image of Syrian, but older than before, hunched, scarred, with eyes filled not with strength, but with regret. His voice, static-laced but heavy with feeling, filled the chamber. I recorded this in secret, not for the council, not even for the resistance, but for you, Vaelira. She stepped forward, breath caught. Kael stood frozen beside her. If the memory core activated, the projection continued, then the clone Kael is alive, and you've survived, which means it's not over. Kael's mouth went dry. Not over, he repeated. Syrian's projection turned toward Kael. There is one more vault, the Council's final legacy, a device hidden beneath the southern pole, something they built in secret after we fell. A fail-safe to control memory, overwrite truth. A neural lattice capable of rewriting history on a galactic scale. Vaelira's face went pale. No. They meant to erase us, Syrian said. Not just the Varel, but every idea we stood for. If it activates, everything we just remembered, everything you are, will vanish again. Kael swallowed. Then we shut it down. The hologram nodded. I buried the coordinates in the pendant, but I didn't leave instructions on how to destroy it. That choice belongs to you. The image began to fade, but before it vanished, Syrian said one last thing. Kael, you are not me, and that is why you might succeed. The silence that followed was unbearable. Kael finally broke it. So, that was terrifying. Vaelira didn't speak. She stood motionless, eyes fixed on the fading afterglow of the message. He moved toward her. You okay, no? She whispered. I thought remembering would be the hardest part. But now, I know forgetting was the real mercy. Kael nodded. But we have a shot now, to stop it. For real. She looked at him, and then quietly she stepped closer than ever before, until her forehead touched his. I don't care if you're Syrian's echo or just some stubborn human with terrible jokes. You're mine, Kael. His breath hitched. I should warn you, he whispered. I snore. I'll kill you if you do, he smiled. And then they kissed. No fire, no desperation, just two souls finally allowed to meet without war, without betrayal, without memory getting in the way. Afterward, as they packed supplies and prepped for the southward journey, Kael stood at the beacon's base one last time. We might not come back here, he said. Vaelira stepped beside him. We don't need to. He looked at the stars overhead. Do you think the galaxy's ready for the truth? She shook her head. I don't care. Really, she turned to him. I'm not fighting for the galaxy anymore, Kael. I'm fighting for us. He met her eyes and realized maybe for the first time that survival was never about the strongest, the smartest, or even the most remembered. It was about the ones willing to walk together into the ice, into the dark, knowing that what they carried was worth it. And together they stepped into the snow again, heading south, toward the end, or the beginning. They journeyed southward through silence and spectral storms. The light from the beacon faded behind them, swallowed by the ridges and frozen canyons of Arcana 7. Ahead lay the unknown, a final vault buried in a polar grave, a machine engineered to rewrite truth itself. Kael Dren had stopped trying to convince himself that he wasn't Syrian. He wasn't, not really. But echoes had weight, and some echoes didn't fade. They became something new. He glanced at Vaelira. Her cloak shimmered slightly under the stormlight ice crystals clinging to the strands of her hair. She didn't walk like someone returning to a battlefield, she walked like someone choosing to confront it, willfully, for herself, for them. He followed without question. They reached the edge of the polar shelf 2 days later. What greeted them was not a structure, but a scar. The southern pole of Arcanus was fractured, riddled with deep gouges that shimmered faintly with artificial light, pulsing beneath layers of compressed ice. It was as if someone had tried to bury something, but the planet had refused. The vault, or whatever it was, pulsed faintly beneath a translucent crust. Found it, Kael said, peering into the chasm. Vaelira crouched beside him. It's awake. She was right. Kael could feel it like static crawling over his skin. The same feeling he'd had when the beacon activated, only colder, deeper, hungrier. He activated the pendant's interface. A narrow path illuminated down into the chasm, perfectly symmetrical. Unnaturally warm. Well, Kael said, sighing, this has a trap written all over it. Vaelira gave a faint smile. Then let's spring it together. The descent was quiet. No alarms, no defenses. Just a sense of pressure, like walking through time, memory, and judgment all at once. At the base of the chasm, the path opened into a cathedral-like space. Tall obsidian pillars lined the chamber, each engraved with species names from across the galaxy. Kael ran his hand over them. They were cataloging civilizations, he muttered, preparing to overwrite them. Vaelira's expression darkened. Not overwritten. Curate. The council always believed truth was a luxury, not a right. At the center of the vault, a massive spire rose, a crystalline obelisk connected to a lattice of neural threads, flickering with stored thought. It pulsed once as they approached. Kael flinched. A voice, synthetic yet disturbingly familiar, echoed through the chamber. Identity confirmed. Viral code active. Accessing genetic relay. Syrian, clone signature accepted. Kael turned to Vaelira. Guess I just rang the doorbell. The ground trembled. The spire retracted halfway into the floor, and from it a sphere emerged. It was different from the last spindle. This one didn't hum. It listened. Begin final rewrite, sequence. Kael stepped forward, heart pounding. Wait, if we don't stop, this memory reconstruction will commence into -10 minutes. Full historical override. Authority Council Prime. Vaelira drew her blade. Kael read the interface. There was no shutdown option, no off switch, only one command: override or comply. He looked at her. What happens if we let this run? All memories of the Varel rebellion will be erased, she said. Syrian sacrifice, my exile, even the Thanok uprising. History will remember what they want it to. Kael stepped back. His fingers twitched over the interface. I could override it, he said. But I'd have to use the pendant's full charge. It'd erase the genetic data. I'd lose the connection to Syrian. Forever. Vaelira frozen. That means Kael nodded. I wouldn't remember him, or what he felt, or how you felt about him. I'd just be me. Only me. She stared at him, conflict raging behind her eyes. I don't want to lose that part of you, she said. But I'm not him, Kael said softly. And maybe it's time we stop treating me like I was. The machine pulsed louder. 5 minutes remaining. Vaelira stepped forward and placed her hand over Kael's. If you're going to let him go, she whispered, then let me remember for both of us. Kael swallowed hard, then activated the override. The moment was silent, the deafening. Light exploded through the vault, flooding the chamber in a wave of color and heat. The spire shattered. Neural threads collapsed like severed nerves. Kael felt it, like a weight leaving his soul, and a space forming in its place. He collapsed to one knee, breath ragged, empty. The pendant on his chest cracked down the middle. Its glow faded, then died. He looked up, eyes unfocused. Is it done? Vaelira knelt beside him. Her touch was warm, steady. It's over, she said. Do you still remember him? Kael asked, barely audible. She hesitated, then nodded. Yes. And me? She smiled through tears. Yes. They sat there for a while, side by side beneath the ruined vault and shattered histories. No longer shadows, no longer echoes, but two people who had made a choice, to remember and to live. The signal from the shattered dome was faint like a heartbeat, muffled beneath layers of frost and memory. But it still pulsed. Even in ruin, the ancient structure clung to life, as if refusing to let go of the secrets embedded within. Kael and Vaelira stood at its edge, gear strapped tight, the pendant now wrapped in insulated mesh across Kael's chest. The glow hadn't dimmed since the last resonance. If anything, it had grown stronger, like it wanted to be seen. I wanted to be heard. They had one destination left, the summit of the ice spire, a jagged ridge of frozen stone, where the council's relay was said to be hidden, a place built not to protect knowledge, but to contain it. Kael adjusted his goggles. So let me get this straight. We're walking into a mountain that may or may not have been designed to erase galactic memory. And there's no back door. Vaelira didn't look at him. There is only forward. That's ominous. Then it's accurate. The climb took hours. Each step up the jagged ascent was a war with the wind. Snow bit at their faces like needles. Gravity felt personal. Vaelira led, using her enhanced musculature and training to carve safe paths through unstable terrain. Kael followed, teeth-gritted body burning from exertion and the dull ache of questions he still hadn't answered. He was tired of feeling like a walking enigma, of being someone else's consequence. But as he climbed and the summit loomed larger, a thought struck him, quiet and almost shameful. What if I am just a shadow? What if Syrian was the real light and I'm only what's left? He didn't say it aloud, but she must have seen it in his eyes, because when they reached the next ridge, Vaelira paused. You're not a shadow, she said without turning. I saw him die, Kael. You made it this far. He blinked. Did you just read my mind? No. You just have a very loud face. Kael smirked. Guess I'll work on that. They reached the summit just as the sun, a pale dying star in the distance, crested over the icy horizon. The ice spire wasn't a tower as Kael had imagined, but a hollow and obsidian bowl carved into the mountain with metallic shards jutting from its edges like broken wings. In the center stood the heart of silence, an obelisk 3 stories high, wrapped in dormant resonance cables, each one twitching like a vein trying to pulse again. This is it, Vaelira said. Kael stepped closer. The pendant on his chest began to vibrate. A hum, then a whine, then connection. Recognize virile lineage. Recognize genetic signature. Recognize suppressed core. The heart of silence came to life. Light rippled across its surface, and from its center a voice, but not Syrian's, not Kael's. It was hers. Initiating resonance archive, Vaelira of the Northern Flame. Kael turned to her in shock. Vaelira stood motionless, but her hands were clenched. This message was encoded in secrecy, to be unlocked only if I fail. Her own voice echoed back at her, younger, more defiant. If you are hearing this, then the Council has destroyed what we were. They will rewrite us, our history, our rebellion. They will turn us into myths, traitors, ghosts, The projection shifted. Now her holographic image appeared shorter hair armor, brighter eyes burning with purpose. But if someone finds this, if he finds this, knows that Syrian died protecting the truth. Not just mine. Hi. We were never weapons. We were witnesses. Kael felt his breath hitch. The message ended. Silence. Real silence. The kind that wraps around your ribs and squeezes. Vaelira stepped back. She looked lost. And Kael for once knew exactly what to do. He reached out and took her hand. She didn't pull away. They activated the core together. The heart of silence pulsed once, twice, then shot a beam of energy upward through the storm, the ice, the planet. A signal no longer hidden, not encrypted, not ashamed. It carried every memory Vaelira had locked away. Every betrayal, every truth, every act of love and resistance and fury. And the moment it passed the upper atmosphere, someone answered. Kael's comm crackled. A voice distorted mechanical cut through the static. Unidentified transmission source detected. Origin Arcanus 7. Human signal carrier confirmed. Stand by for identification. Kael stared. Vaelira froze. Then the voice came again. Kael Dren. You are broadcasting a Class X forbidden resonance. In accordance with Council Memory Regulation Click. Kael shut it off. Vaelira raised an eyebrow. Are we expecting company? Kael sighed. Oh yeah, but they're not here for tea. They retreated into the summit's inner passageways, forgotten tunnels woven beneath the heart of silence. It wasn't a vault, it was a warning system. Within its deepest chamber, they found it a star map, projected from an ancient Varel interface. Dozens of systems blinking red. Others are marked in blue. Vaelira stared at it. These are the memory relay points. Kael nodded. And that blinking dot in the center, that's us, and the ones moving ships. Big ones. Kael exhaled. So, it begins. Vaelira didn't look away from the map. No, she said. It continues. The map didn't blink. It pulsed steady, deliberate, as if each flash marked a choice, made long ago now surfacing like forgotten wreckage from beneath the sea. Kael stared at the approaching ships with a creeping dread that felt almost clinical, like his brain had decided to insulate him from the gravity of what was happening. They're coming fast, he said mostly to himself. That's Dominion-class drive speed. No commercial engines move like that. Vaelira stood beside him, arms folded, eyes unreadable. The Council doesn't send messengers. No, Kael replied grimly. They send cleanup crews. The first wave hit before they even reached the outer ridge. A thunderous crack shattered the thin atmosphere as three sleek black vessels pierced through the clouds, low-flying, angular, unmistakably council-bound. No emblems, just matte hulls and bright blue undersides designed to blend in with planetary skies while broadcasting silent authority. From each descended a detachment of armored figures, not soldiers, not enforcers. Archivists. The worst kind of assassin, because they didn't kill you. They deleted you. Kael Dren of Earth, the lead archivist's voice boomed across the ridge, amplified by a neural broadcast array. You are in possession of forbidden Varel memory tech. Stand down and prepare for cerebral extraction. Kael whispered to Vaelira, cerebral extraction? That's a polite way to say brain scoop, right? More like a soul strip. Comforting. He stepped forward, held up the shattered pendant in his hand. You want this? The lead archivist nodded once. Then come and get it. The response was immediate. Two archivists broke formation, moving with impossible speed-enhanced armor, gliding over the ice like liquid metal. Kael raised his hand, and from his belt, a charged flare fired straight into the faceplate of the first. It didn't stop him, but it confused him long enough for Vaelira to close the distance. Her blade hummed to life, and the first archivist lost a leg. Kael ducked as the second dove toward him, baton crackling with neuromagnetic charge. He rolled aside, grabbed a shard of crystalline ice, and jammed it into the helmet joint. Sparks. A hiss. A body collapsed beside him. More were coming. Too many. Kael backed toward the ridge with Vaelira beside him, panting hard. Any bright ideas, he gasped. She glanced back. To the echo drop. You made that up. No, you just forgot it. Wonderful. The echo drop wasn't marked on any map. It was a fissure deep and narrow formed during the early construction of the Heart of Silence. It had no bottom, or at least none that sensors could find. But Vaelira had once used it as a route of exile long ago. Now it would be their salvation or their grave. They reached it in minutes. The wind howled upward from the chasm's mouth like something alive screamed below. Kael stared into it. Well, I've had worse dates. Vaelira didn't wait. She jumped. Kael cursed and followed. Falling through the echo drop was not like falling through air. It felt slowed but not gentle, like reality itself was unwilling to release them. Wind twisted, gravity flipped, sound compressed, and then silence. They landed in what could only be described as a womb of stone walls glowing with ancient biocircuits, symbols etched in glowing cyan, and a terminal unlike any Kael had seen. This isn't just a hiding place, he whispered. Vaelira was already moving. It's the core archive, the what she turned, the last safe copy of the original memory lattice. Everything Syrian tried to save. Everything the Council feared. Kael stepped forward. You mean, if we broadcast from here? She said they can't stop it. The interface lit up. Recognized both their biometrics. No passwords, no delays. Just two options. Broadcast burn. Kael stared. Why burn in case capture was inevitable? He glanced at her. What would you choose? She didn't hesitate. Broadcast. He smiled. Same. The moment Kael touched the console, his breath caught. Not because of pain, but because of everything. Images, voices, ghosts of wars and peace. The full truth of the Varel uprising, not the version told in war colleges, but the real one. A story of refusal, of love, of betrayal born not from weakness, but from hope. The system didn't just send it as data, it sent it as emotion, across the stars, across time. The truth broke into the Council's archives like sunlight through glass. And for the first time in 72 years, the galaxy remembered. Above the archivist ships received the signal, and short-circuited. Some tried to purge, others tried to rewrite, but they couldn't. The truth was rooted in them, in the systems, in people. Down below, Kael collapsed beside the terminal. Vaelira caught him. You did it, she whispered. No, he murmured, barely conscious. We did. She held him close, and for the first time the ice didn't feel cold. It felt like peace. Above them, the stars didn't change, but the way people would see them, that was already different. And change, as Kael Dren had learned, didn't start with battleships. It started with memory, and someone brave enough to remember. The song of the archive didn't stop. Even after the broadcast finished, after the signal left the frozen heart of Arcanis and raced across the stars, it lingered. A low, resonant hum like a heartbeat through the bones of the planet, echoing out from the core they'd awakened. Kael lay motionless on the ground, eyelids fluttering, breath shallow but present. His body had withstood the data surge, but barely. It was never meant for a human mind alone, not without the Varel genetic bindings. And yet, he had made it through. Vaelira sat beside him, one hand resting over his chest, feeling the faint rise and fall like a prayer. Her face was unreadable, not stoic, guarded, as if any break in her focus might let grief slip in too soon. I'm still here, Kael rasped, eyes half-lidded. She flinched. Kael, you didn't even say anything sarcastic, he whispered. That's how I knew I might be dying. She exhaled, part laugh, part sob. You idiot, only on Tuesdays. He coughed, groaned, then sat up slowly. The archive light bathed them both in a soft amber glow. Around them, the vault walls pulsed gently, no longer hiding, but welcoming, as if the planet itself had waited for someone to open its throat and sing again. Vaelira helped him to his feet. You shouldn't have survived that, she said. Yeah, I'm starting to think I specialize in things I'm not supposed to survive. She looked at him long and deep. You're not Syrian, but if he could see you now? Kael smiled. He'd probably say, stop stealing my girl. Her eyes narrowed. He raised both hands defensively. I'm joking. She stepped closer. Then let me be clear. She reached up, touched the cracked remains of the pendant hanging from his chest. This was his. Her hand lowered, pressed against Kael's chest. This is yours. He swallowed, not because he was nervous, because something in him, Something buried had just been released. The ascent from the echo drop was harder than the descent. The path collapsed behind them, too unstable for return. The core archive, like everything ancient and alive, had a sense of timing. Its final breath had been spoken. Now it will rest again. Outside, the sky had changed, not in color, in silence. There were no ships, no archivist squads, no orbital threats, just stillness, and then movement. From the horizon, a craft emerged, sleek, silver, human design. Kael squinted as it descended, landing gear pressing into the snow with a muted hiss. The rear hatch opened. Two figures emerged. One carried a rifle. The other wore a red Exploration Corps jacket. Kael blinked. No way. Vaelira tensed. You know them, he stepped forward. As the figure pulled off their helmet, he let out a breathless laugh. Captain Arlen, the woman saluted with mock formality. Dren, you're officially 2 weeks overdue for being dead. Kael grinned. Missed me. We picked up a rogue Varel signal from one of the old orbital junkers and traced the echo down here. I thought it was a prank. Then it started unlocking Dominion files. She glanced at Vaelira. And this Vaelira stepped forward, chin high, every inch the exile turned legend. I am Vaelira of the Varel, and I remember. Arlen studied her for a moment, then gave a sharp nod. Welcome back to history. Inside the ship, as they lifted from Arcanus 7's glacial grip, Kael watched the icy surface shrink beneath them. The dome, the ridge, the ruins of memory, all fading into pale mist. He turned to Vaelira, who sat beside him in the cabin's low light, her blade across her lap. Where do we go now, he asked. She didn't answer immediately. Then wherever there's silence, we bring songs. Kael leaned back, let out a long, slow breath. You always talk like you're writing scripture. She glanced at him. I just lived through a miracle. Kael reached over, took her hand, and smiled. Then let's make the next one together. Behind them, in the orbit of a forgotten world, hundreds of beacons flared silently to life, reactivated by the resonance Kael had triggered. And in the quiet halls of power across the galaxy, leaders, archivists, historians, and rebels watched as memories once thought erased returned. Truths that had been buried rose like the stars. And a new era began, not with war, but with remembrance. The official record called it a Class X resonance breach. The Council's archivists scrambled, racing to contain the fallout, rewriting public feeds, disabling truth thread relays. But it was too late. The signal had already rooted itself across civilian databases, unmoderated channels, old ships' logs, even children's learning notes. It spread not like fire, but like memory. You couldn't put the memory back in the box. You couldn't tell someone they didn't feel what they remembered. And what the galaxy now remembers was her, Vaelira, exile, witness, warrior, and him, Kael Dren. Not Syrian, not the past, but present and chosen. They didn't return to Earth, not right away. Too dangerous. Too many eyes. Too many curious observers who called themselves ambassadors and researchers and reconstructionists. Instead, the Exploration Corps placed them in orbit around Elira's Rest, a neutral system far from Council jurisdiction, a place where war was once fought, then forgotten. The irony was perfect. Kael hated politics, but he understood it. You don't throw a truth bomb into the heart of a galactic empire and not expect some paperwork. He sat on the edge of a metallic balcony, legs dangling, watching the planet spin slowly below. Pale blue, unscarred. Vaelira stood beside him, arms folded. They're going to want to use you, she said. I'm used to it. She looked down. I'm not, Kael shrugged. Then we'll say no. You make it sound easy. Not easy, just ours. She didn't answer, but her gaze softened. A few days later, a delegation arrived, diplomats, historians, military advisors, each with their own angle, each with their own demand. They didn't know what to do with Kael. They couldn't prosecute him. They couldn't debrief him. He wasn't Syrian. He was worse. He was new, uncontrolled, unrepeatable, and Vaelira. She wasn't a criminal anymore. She was a symbol, the one they failed to erase, the one who refused to become a weapon and became a memory instead. Together they were dangerous. Together they were hopeful. That night, in the quiet glow of their private quarters aboard the orbital station, Kael asked her the question he'd been holding for days. If Sirian had lived, would he have changed everything? Vaelira didn't look away from the stars. No, she said. Why not? Because he was still bound to what was. You are not. Kael leaned in. You're really bad at answering things directly. She turned to him, eyes fierce. I don't love ghosts, Kael. He froze, then softened and reached for her hand. She let him. They made plans after that. Not for revolution, not for war, for restoration, to rebuild the histories that had been severed, to find the descendants of the Vaelira who'd been scattered, exiled, buried beneath rewritten textbooks in silence, to show the galaxy what it truly meant to remember, not for vengeance, but for healing. On the last day of the week, Kael stood before the beacon replica they'd constructed aboard the station, an exact copy of the one on Arcanus 7. It didn't sing anymore. It listened. Messages came in from across the stars, remembrances, testimonies, fragments of forgotten truths. He played one back, a voice trembling. My grandmother used to speak of a woman with silver eyes and a blade made of light. She said she saved us, but no one believed her. Kael smiled. She will now. Vaelira walked up beside him. Ready? He nodded. Where to next? She pulled up a star map. There's a vault on Sirath's moon, another council memory depot, untouched. He grinned. You always know how to plan a romantic getaway. She smiled. Only the best for my memory thief. As their ship slipped into the stars once more, Kael looked out at the sea of light stretching before them. He didn't feel like a clone anymore. He didn't feel like a shadow. He felt like himself. And with her beside him, he was finally whole. Because beneath the ice, they didn't just find survival. They found truth. They found each other. And now they would find the rest of the galaxy, one forgotten memory at a time. This was never a story about war. Not really. Not about blood or battlefields or betrayal. This was a story about remembrance, about the dangerous power of memory in a galaxy that would rather forget. It was about two people broken by history, stitched together not by fate, but by choice. Kael Dren could have run. He could have left the dome abandoned, the pendant shrugged off the name Sirian like a costume that never fit. But he didn't. He stayed. He stayed because survival isn't enough, not when someone else's past refuses to let go of your future. Vaelira could have killed him. She had every reason to. But she didn't. Because something in him sparked a resonance she hadn't felt in decades, a note from a song she'd thought erased. And in that resonance, something new was born. Not a repeat, not a ghost, but a second beginning. They fought not to win a war, but to protect something rarer than peace, the truth. And now as their ship sails between stars, carrying a beacon of memory that no empire can silence, one thing becomes painfully, beautifully clear. When history forgets you, you must choose to remember yourself. Even if the galaxy isn't ready. Even if it costs everything. Because love, real love, isn't about who you were. It's about who you become. Together.